Good evening, everybody. Time to get rolling on our next lesson, which is lesson number 8, Be Hospitable. We didn't have a lot of reading, so we will get into some questions. I'm going to bring up some other things for us to think about so that we can have a full class. Now, I know we're a little light in number this evening, but we have been full lately of participation and full of a lot of you guys teaching each other. I hope you realize that when you do speak up and comment, you are teaching each other. You're teaching me too, just by simply the good observations that you make. The scriptures tell us that we even teach when we sing. We don't always think about that sometimes, but it is true. We teach and admonish, or are supposed to, at least, in our singing. And your participation in the class really, I hope you know, it helps each other. When I talk to people after class and we've had a lively discussion, people seem rejuvenated and intrigued by it. So feel free to jump in. Like I said, if I'm going and rambling, just feel free to stop me and say what you need to say. So we will talk about being hospitable to one another, something that I think this group particularly has excelled in. So it may not be as much of a shot across the bow or a call to action. It could be if you feel like maybe you're lacking in this department. But even though we're good at something, like we've said before, I hope we never lose it. I hope we stay sharp with what we're already good at and can maybe even make some improvements along the way. The hospitality of this group, I think, is something that stands out. And if you ever want to know what people think of you, ask a visitor. And, it's not uncommon for us to get warm praise from visitors and from people who have kind of transplanted in. And I feel qualified to say that because of all the moving around I've done and all the different congregations I've been a part of. So looking forward to jumping into this with you. To kind of set our minds, I will read the second half of Luke 12:48. It says, "Everyone to whom much was given, of him much will be required. And from him to whom they entrusted much, they will demand more." Just think about that and pocket that as we roll into our lesson. Now, hospitality, some claim is a lost art in America. I think being in, I guess we're considered culturally in the southeast region, I see it a little more alive and well here. And I've seen it in other places I've been as just a common courtesy. I feel like generally this is a hospitable community, just the Pulaski County area. In the church, as we always excel, I think, to not meet the standard of the world, but to meet the standard of God, which will many times exceed the expectations of the rest of the world. Many of us may look at hospitality as perhaps a relic of the past. And maybe if it is, maybe we can reverse that trend. And you see it in a lot of places. I don't necessarily think it's always just a generational thing. It can be. I see a lot of people, just as cultures mix and generations clash and mingle. I would like to think the older generations, maybe that baby boomer generation, was really good at this because just the sense of community, maybe needing to. Economically, the average person in America at that time was probably, I would say, maybe worse off than the average person now, but if you've had to buy a house in the last 5 years, you probably don't feel that way. But the need for community to be hospitable is certainly there, and I don't think it will ever fade, especially in the church. And you hear people with disagreements on what hospitability may even look like. I even hear complaints from the younger generation or people around my age complaining that their parents don't ever want to be around and don't ever want to be around the grandkids because they're just retired now and they want to go do their own thing. So there's I can't speak to the demographics of how true that is or not true. Certainly not here to cast stones. I just think it's interesting to see what each person feels like they need from the other person, and what kind of hospitality they think should be bestowed on them. It's interesting. I think hospitality, just like doing good works and serving each other, is really good for the hospitable one. It is good for your mind. It's good for your soul. It's good for your heart. It keeps you about the business of the kingdom. Speaking about the grandchildren thing, I saw a recent study that talked about people that are deeply involved with their grandchildren, that they live longer, they have less chronic illness, they report more happiness. And I'm not sure if that's causation or correlation or what. I know it's certainly a joy to me to be around little folks. So, and I'm sure many of you feel the same way. But it is a commandment of God. And if you want, let's go ahead and jump into the text. And starting in Genesis 18, 1 through 8, I want to talk about some hospitality practice. You know what I'm trying to say. Hospitality practices of people in the Bible. Genesis 1 through 8. Anybody read that? Who wants to give a rundown of what they observed from hospitality from this example? Genesis 1 through 8. Or Genesis 18, 1 through 8, excuse me.
Which one you want? You want to read or?
No. Well, you know what? If you want to read, let's do that. Just as a refresher. And then Miss Carol, I'll go to you for the first comment. I expect some more.
And the Lord appeared unto him in the plains of Mamre, and he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day, and he lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door and bowed himself towards the ground. And he said, My Lord, if now I have found favor in thy sight, pass not away. I pray thee for thy servant. Let a little water, I pray thee, be fetched, and wash your feet, and rest yourself under the tree. And I will fetch a morsel of bread, and comfort you your hearts. After that ye shall pass on. For therefore are ye come to your servant. And they said, So do, and thou hast said. And Abraham hastened into the tent unto Sarah, and said, Make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes upon your hearth. And Abraham ran unto the herd, and fetched a calf tender and good, and gave it to the young man, and he hastened to dress it. And he took butter and milk, and the calf which he had dressed, and set before them, and he stood by them under a tree, and they did eat.
Thank you very much. What stands out to you about this hospitality example, Miss Carol?
He was very hospitable.
Yes.
He gave everything.
Yes.
But did he know it was Jesus?
There's some debate on that. Is this an angel? Is this God the Father and God the Son? You're going to need somebody smarter than me to unpack that, more prepared. I don't know that he knew that, but he did call them my Lord.
My Lord, yes.
I think he had a clue that they were not just, strangers off the street. Abraham being a wealthy man with flocks and herds and having these things at his disposal for him, somehow, some way he recognized these people were very important. These angels were very important. Does them being angels or representatives of a higher power, or however you want to categorize this, does that dictate the hospitality? Meaning, if they weren't that, do they still get hospitality?
I would think so.
I would think so. The scriptures seem to point us in that direction. The Good Samaritan, we have no reason to believe that the man that was beaten and left in the ditch was particularly of wealth or influence. Could have been. We don't know that. I don't think we can easily assert that. But certainly, if we want to key in on this, that these were angels from the Lord, that does create a sense of responsibility, right? If you guys knew there was a representative of the Lord here, you would be, I think, very, yes, ma'am.
You know what it says in verse 13?
What's that?
And the Lord said.
And the Lord said. Yeah, that also kind of jumped out at me of this is maybe a little bit something stronger probably than just a messenger. Yes. Which creates that sense of responsibility. What do you guys think is the likelihood that what happened to Abraham happens to you? And I don't mean living in the tent and being on the plains of Mamre, but the angels or the Lord coming to visit.
We are judged by our works.
Yes.
Aren't we told in Scripture that to treat everyone well because you could be entertaining an angel?
Yes. And next class we'll get into that if that means that's still applicable for today. I have some preparing to do on that deep subject. But I think most of us understand that the Lord incarnate is not going to walk into our home. Well, what's the next closest thing? And I passed an angel. What's the next closest thing?
Your neighbor.
Yeah, your fellow brothers and sisters in Christ. They're a representative of the Lord.
Well, I want to think that we could angels.
Well, I would say, and I'm going to dive into that a little more, and I would say that there's no harm in treating it that way because you're always going to be on your P's and Q's about how to be hospitable and treat others. And I will try to dig into that more, Miss Carol, and see if we can shed a little light on that. But Abraham offered food. He offered rest. He offered what seemed to be the choice of his food. And something that stood out to me was urgency. When you read him, it says he ran, right? When's the last time a visitor coming over has caused you to run? He runs into the tent. It seems that it was almost, I'm not saying Sarah or Abraham was unkind to Sarah, but that he made a pretty matter-of-fact statement. They're here. Prepare this for them. Get what they need. He was urgent about it. Tells his servant, the young man, kill and prepare this calf. Not an easy task. I've never done farm to table right there on the spot on an animal, but I would imagine that's quite the undertaking. So there was no inconvenience. Did anybody get the sense that Abraham felt this was an inconvenience in any way? No. So to kind of reverse engineer that, though, if your boss asked you to do something so labor intensive, or you just, without context, was asked to do something so labor intensive that and also costed money and these other things, wouldn't you view that as an inconvenience just by itself, void of context? I mean, I think we could easily categorize it as that, right? We're all busy. We got things to do. We have jobs. We talked about that. In other classes, a lot of people have a job, and then they have a side project, and maybe a tertiary side project, and kids play in 17 different sports, and we're running around, and if you were tasked with this, in addition to all that, it could be an inconvenience. And that is why I think, going back to what we talked about earlier, is having that margin in your life, having that room in your life, that you're not so busy and busted and broken that you do not have the mental energy or the means or the time to serve a member of the body of Christ. And not only did Abraham not look at this as an inconvenience, how did he present his proposition to the Lord in this? If I have found, if I'm worthy, would you please let me do this? Not as if it was it was a privilege to him to get to be able to do this. Would you please let me do this? And when you can convey that message to someone, they're a lot more apt to take your hospitality. That please let us help you mentality is very, very calming. It's very warming. I had a friend from church I played basketball with, and I'll remember this forever. It's kind of a minute thing. We've been playing basketball for a while, and I said, "Can I have a drink of your water, please? I know it's your water bottle, and you were prepared, and you brought this. I did not." And he looked at me, he said, "I hope you will. I hope that you will." And that just always stood out to me. Is I hope I get to help you. I hope you take what's mine as it's yours. And does anybody here have trouble accepting a little help or hospitality sometimes? I do. But if someone has this attitude of please let me do this, I kind of break down my walls a little bit, and I'm apt to take the help. I grew up in a family, and I don't mean to make this sound like my immediate family was not hospitable, but they did not particularly enjoy long visitors, long company. I think they got that from just generations of how the family practiced. They did go out of their way to save my life as a young man, and a couple other boys as well. So I can't in any good conscience say they're anything less than hospitable. But what that did, it kind of primed me for this thought of like, never intrude on anybody. Don't ever intrude on anybody. If you're at somebody's house, don't take anything to eat, don't take anything to drink, don't be a burden, don't stay too long. I remember being a really small child at my uncle's house and like telling my mom, like, can you ask him if I can ask him? Would that be okay if I get something to drink? And I want to say that being around you all, I've been able to let that go a little bit. One of the huge things for me, and I've told this story before, was dear sweet Michael and Tara, when we moved to the area, and I could not figure out the logistics and the finances of making that work, but I knew we wanted to get back. And Tara told me, like, no, what are you worried about? You can stay with us as long as you like, and it is not an intrusion. And I got to tell you, I told her this. I said, I like to eat. You can probably tell that. Love to eat. There's 2 times in my life I was too nervous to eat. First time was boot camp. People think you lose a lot of weight in boot camp from the activity. Well, that coupled with you have no idea what's going to happen the next second also made me too nervous to eat. And right then in that moment, in those weeks when we were trying to prepare for the move, I was too nervous to eat because I did not know, am I going to make my family and children homeless? And one of the things Tara said to me, she said, you can come here and live, but you have to promise me you don't look at yourself as a burden. That's one of the conditions of the deal. And I said, I cannot make that promise, but I will promise really hard to try not to. And I just think that's something that in our day and age, probably we should add with our hospitality is that you make the people feel like it's ready and welcome to give. I think generally it is hard. In the biblical days, you see examples of hospitality, and it was a great need. Take these fellow Christians in, or they're not going to have a place to go. They're being persecuted. It's a greater need. When the need isn't as emergent, it sometimes seems like there's less we have to do. Even something as simple as having the preacher over for dinner on gospel meeting nights in our sign-up sheet. I mean, generally, just because I don't write my name down there, he's probably going to still get a meal somewhere, right? And does he even want to come over and be bothered by me? But those are small examples of things that we can do to show hospitality. With Abraham, he provided food, rest, water, and a sense of urgency and a pleading of, please let me do this. Please let me help you. 1 Kings chapter 7, 8 through 16. For the sake of time, I'll just recap. This is a widow giving the last of what she had to Elijah. Matter of fact, she said, he said, bring me something to eat. And he said, she said, I have a little bit for me and my child, and then we're going to lay down and die. And the Lord makes the promise, well, that's, through Elijah, still give me some of that, and you will not want for anything. And it came true. What strikes you about that story? What stands out to you guys about this? What about the ask? Was the ask pretty heavy, given her situation? Sure it was. Sure it was. Kind of goes back to the example of the widow with their 2 mites. Jesus said she gave more than the rich. Because you don't have much when you're asked to give exactly that, it's more powerful. But she puts her trust in the Lord, and she is rewarded for such. And there's something to be said about someone who will give you, when people say they'll give you the shirt off their back, when people will give you their last dime. Did you have something, Mr. Noah?
Just going off of what you just said, the poor woman, she, going back to the example of Abraham was rich, she had literally nothing. She didn't have any calf to run to go kill and feed them. She literally had nothing.
Yes.
And it wasn't to just the detriment of her and her son's hunger, it was to the detriment of her and her son's health, and to the point of death.
Yes. Yeah, if she says, after we eat this, we're just going to die. I don't know if she meant today or near future, but that seems pretty urgent. But to put her faith in God and think about the scripture we read. Think about the scripture we read when we first started and put that in context. I saw something online about when you ask someone who is a true friend, you ask a couple people for $500. And this one person sends you $500, and your best friend sends you $273.16. Anybody catch on to what that is?
Yeah, that's all we had.
Gave you every dime he had. And that's a very powerful mark. So, moving on, we have the example in 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 8 through 11 of Elisha. And he's passing through, and he likes to stop at this house. And the owners of the home say, let's go up on our roof. Let's build him a room. So that instead of just stopping in, he can have a place to stay from then on. And they were rewarded. Acts chapter 4, verse 32 through 35. This again points to maybe an example. The last 2 examples of it seems like people that didn't have a lot, but still made sure they gave what they had. Acts 4, 32, 35 goes back to what seems to be people with a little more wealth. They're selling what they have, and they're bringing it to the apostles' feet, because you have a large mixture of needy traveling saints and new saints, and the work of the almighty kingdom beginning, and they wanted to contribute to that cause. We have the example in Acts of Lydia housing Paul, and what I really thought in 2 Timothy chapter 1, 16 through 18, that was really powerful was Onesiphorus seeking Paul. It said he sought me out when I was in Rome, and to refresh and comfort him. Do you ever think about how hard that must have been? No cell phone, no Facebook, no Life 360 to tell somebody's location. To just get on a ship, sail to Rome, and say, hey, there's a prisoner somewhere. I got to see him. You imagine what he had to do to find Paul? Couldn't imagine that was very easy. There was such urgency and such a sense of responsibility. This is a prisoner for the Lord. I need to find him, and I need to make sure he's okay. Could you imagine yourself in Paul's shoes? That you've sailed halfway across your known world, you're basically in a prison or barracks and house arrest type of encampment, and one day you look up and you see one of your brothers from another place, probably pretty raggedy and tired, coming to visit you. How did you find me? And what they must have went through to find him. and what that meant to Paul, so much so that he included him in his letters to Timothy. I don't know that a couple verses can state the magnitude of that. That's one of these things we just kind of roll right over. Like, that was really impactful, but the magnitude of that. It almost seems that maybe, again, going back to the first century situation, that these examples of hospitality were a little more common, almost a little more expected by the way it's written. But I would say that is that would rattle me to my core to see the love of God reflecting in people so much. When you're very hospitable to somebody, what are you communicating to them?
God's love.
God's love. Very good. What else? What do you think you're saying to them directly?
They're important to you.
They're important to you. Very much. Do you ever receive hospitality and get a little bit of a self-esteem boost that you mean something to somebody, that they love you?
It's also a demonstration of faith.
Okay.
You know, anytime that any hospitality is going to cost us something.
Mm-hmm.
At a bare minimum, it's going to cost us time, maybe some inconvenience, but more than likely it's going to cost us some money, some resources, some food, or whatever it is that we're giving. And when we're unwilling to do that, we're saying that we're either don't have the heart to give, or we don't have the faith that we're going to receive what we need.
Mm.
And when you think about the widow and her 2 mites, that is not just an act of generosity; it's an act of faith.
Mm-hmm.
Because she was taking the absolute nothing that she had and giving it away, giving it to the Lord, and saying, "I know you'll take care of it." And when we sit in our abundance and we say, "Oh, I don't have anything to give," what are we saying to God, and what are we saying to those around about us?
Mm. Yes. And remember that I love that you brought that up and trying to unpack that. We talked about people that are extremely generous briefly before in class. Anybody remember why they were able to be so generous? They had a mindset that everything they had was really whose? God's. A little easier to hand that out when it's not really yours, right? Right? So, and if we have that mindset, we're ready to give it out. Conversely, if, like Jonathan said, first of all, what are you communicating to the person then when you're not hospitable? You may not say these words, but how's it come across?
Resentment?
Maybe this person doesn't like me. Their value.
I think about the rich young ruler. What the Lord asked him to do. He claimed to have faith that Jesus could save his soul. He believed that Jesus had the answer to salvation, to eternal life. But he either didn't believe that Jesus could care for his physical needs, or he didn't believe that eternity was worth his possessions.
Mm. Yeah, one of the two. Deep down, if you could peel the layers of that onion back, that's really only the answers you're left with, right? Would any of you ever openly go up to a brother or sister and tell them, "You're not really worth my time"? Would you ever do that? Would you ever say, "I just don't think you have the value to dictate me inconveniencing my life and what I got going on with my family? I just don't think you're there"? Would you ever say that? I would hope not.
The problem is not with the person, it's with you.
Yes. But what do you think you say to them when you deny hospitality? Kind of telling them, "You're not worth my time and my resources." And when Paul used the word resentment, I don't know how else you take it. If there is a member of the body and you hear it on the announcements and you see it on their face that they are struggling and nobody rallies around to offer assistance in whatever that could be, just be a spiritual need, a physical need, both, just someone to talk to, and you don't jump to that, I mean, what other conclusion can they conclude besides the fact they know everyone's aware of my situation and no one's doing anything about it? What else could they conclude other than the fact that you don't care? And I think it's a pretty common human thing to criticize yourself and run your own self-worth down a little bit. It's easy to get lost in our heads and reflect on our mistakes. This is a common occurrence in people say in human psychology, that they're laying in bed going to sleep and they realize something really messed up they did in the 6th grade and now they can't sleep anymore. And we are all our own biggest critics. So if you're already your own critic and then you are in a hardship, especially if you're anything like me, I start analyzing, what did I do? Well, how am I at fault to have gotten myself in this situation? And then when your brothers and sisters of the Almighty King say, yeah, you're on your own, well, kind of validates your self-criticism, doesn't it? Like, maybe I'm not worth much. Nobody's jumping to help me. So just reflect on this fact that you would never say those words to someone. Well, then let it be far from us that we ever communicate that without words to someone. Going back to what Jonathan said of this idea of maybe you just don't trust God that he can replace that inconvenience for you. And we see the commands in the scriptures. Now, some of this is almost a miraculous thing, and I'm not saying we should expect miracles, but what I believe when we get to a point where we say, I can't give that, God, I can't give that to them because I need it. I believe what that communicates is, hey, I earned this. I made some good decisions to get myself in this situation. I used my talents and my ability to get here. And if I get rid of it, I don't know that I'm going to have the talents and ability to be back in a good situation. Now, I do believe that some people make really good decisions, and they're very smart and they're very talented. But when you look at that I did this instead of God did this, well, yeah, I understand doubting yourself, that I can't give it away and just go make more. But if God gave it to you from the beginning, certainly can't God replace what you have given? Well, of course. So we look at I think about Pilate standing before Jesus. Obviously, he knows this is not your typical prisoner, but he certainly doesn't understand the full magnitude of who's standing in front of him. Jesus is giving these simple, short answers or no answer. And Pilate basically says, don't you know who you are talking to? I have the power to release you or torture you to death. How about a little respect, Jesus of Nazareth? And Jesus kind of replies, you don't know who you're talking to. And he says, you would not be in this position. You would have nothing unless my Father gave it to you. So when we look at our time and our resources, our possessions as something that God gave and entrusted us with, then it's a little easier to let go of those things. And if you think about the verse we read, to whom much was given, much will be required. Was Abraham asked to do, well, did Abraham seem to feel like he was asked or in the position to do a little more than the poor lady with her son? And he did. And he was certainly rewarded. And those who did not have much were not asked to give as much on a monetary scale, but they were rewarded. You look at, one lady was even barren and rewarded as a son, or were rewarded with a child. Just how much, out of curiosity, how much would one of you guys take for your kids?
Depends on what day you raise.
But, and which one? How much would you give for a son-in-law? Oh, you don't have to answer that. There's no amount. right? So she was rewarded with a gift beyond any monetary number or value. I think about this story when I told you I did this class, A Journey of Generosity. A young man, he was younger than me, and he told this story. He said, my grandma used to send my grandfather out with $10. They didn't have much money. And she said, this is, when you're going doing your thing today, that's all you got. You get your lunch or whatever you need on. And he said, so one day Grandpa pulls me out of school, takes me with him, and he would like to go just do nice things for people, but his rule was, hey, we don't need anything. This $10 is to finding somebody to give it to. We'll eat when we get home tonight. And just that thought of it is a privilege to give this to other people really stood out to me. So I wanted to look at a few other examples of this in a different light. I hope you do not look at this as some dreaded legalistic duty, like a check in the box. And if you're a person who says, mingling with people is not always my thing, I understand there's different personalities. Some people are better at hosting, some have more ability than others. But if you're in this habit of, I don't really know what this looks like and I'm not very good at it. One time I told you I was not used to a lot of home sharing and long visits where I grew up, and I found out, it was actually when I lived in Virginia after I moved from here, I found out Jim and Chris Hardy were traveling to our area for a vacation, and they were telling me how they had this hotel room there, and I was, no, absolutely not. You're not spending any money on it. You're staying with me. I have extra bedrooms. You guys are staying with us. And, of course, they politely, no, we can't do that. And I said, yes, you are doing that. I remember waking up in the middle of the night in a panic, like, am I doing this right? Did I host them correctly? Are they upset? Did I do a bad job? Of course, that was nonsense. I believe they were more than happy to be with us. But if you're in that situation where you don't quite know exactly what this looks like or how to execute this, just like anything in the Christian walk, you don't go from 0 to 100 overnight. Certainly not asking you to sell everything you have tonight and find a way to give it away. This may start in small steps. Matter of fact, I think it will if you're kind of newer at this. But you will find a little bit of small steps that you take, you will feel greatly rewarded and refreshed, and so will the people who you minister to. So it shouldn't be a dreaded legalistic duty. You can find things that you're comfortable with and let that snowball forward. And here is something that I talked to people kind of from two different thoughts on this, is that we really need, my friend who told me, who I shared with you, that said he read the book so he would know how to greet and be warmer and be better with people because that was not his strong suit. One of the things that he had talked about was, the reason I do this is I feel like the church really lacks in just doing anything for any of the brethren at any time. And I don't think that's the case here. And I was kind of struck by that. And I ran it by somebody else who had been a Christian a long, long time. And they told me, they said, I don't think that's a problem at all. I have friends who are addicted to drugs who would give me anything they have and do anything for me. So why are we harping on this? This is just something that people do. Well, those two obviously had very different experiences, right? How many of you, anybody know a non-Christian who is very hospitable, a non-believer who is very hospitable and very kind? You have a friend? I know those people. I look at some of my friends are so kind and hospitable, and I'm like, I cannot believe you are not a Christian. You would make an excellent Christian. You're better in your just natural state at being kind and hospitable than I am when I'm trying to follow Christ. So that goes to say there is a pretty standard baseline a lot of times that you can find outside the church of good hospitality. What do you think happens when someone who is maybe church shopping, trying to untangle different doctrines. I know that's how my family ended up in the Church of Christ. They started hopping different churches. Explain to me what you believe. Can you tell me, explain it to me, your doctrine and how you got there? My mother told my father, made a statement, I don't even know how to become a Christian anymore because of hearing all the different ideals. What do you think comes to that person's mind when they see us, no matter how true our doctrine is, not be very hospitable? Think they're going to dig in very deep?
We don't practice what we preach.
We don't practice what we preach. And they may not even know these commands are in there, but they know, they can see the difference. And if you are trying to teach someone the gospel, this is where I think sometimes we can innocently get things a little out of order. If somebody's a new visitor and they're asking questions about the Lord, I think all of us kind of look and say, hey, that's the most important thing you have is your soul. The longest span of time there is eternity. I want to take care of that and help them reach the conclusions they need to reach to have their soul saved. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what if you are willing to do that, but you're not willing to be hospitable to the person? Do you think it lands real well? I mean, anybody ever had anybody teach you something, but they weren't very kind about it? I've been around people where I'm like, I think they're right about everything, but I sure don't like being around them. Do you think the message of Christ, how good of an evangelist and a converter do you think you're going to be if you don't show hospitality? Even if it's doctrine to not doctrine, and you know you're sound, and you know you have Bible proof, but they can see the difference in your actions. Do you think that would hamper your evangelism a little bit? Yeah, especially given the fact that they see good hospitality in other religions and just people who aren't religious at all. So what do you guys think the responsibility is? I want to use our last bit of time before we, for next week, if you will, prepare for questions 2, 3, and 4. And I think we have a few more questions over on page 33. And please feel free to do all kinds of research on number 3 about entertaining angels and bring any help that you can on that, because I would love to have some help unpacking that. Do we have a let's bring it closer to home. Do we have a hospitable requirement within our own home? Husbands, do you feel like you're supposed to be hospitable and generous to your wives? You better be. You better be. I mean, if you're not going to help provide, try to make their environment better. You asked her to give up your life for you and leave everything and come live a life with you. I would say you have a pretty big responsibility to make that as comfortable as a journey as it can be. Wives, do you feel like it's your job to be hospitable to your husbands? I hope so. As a husband, I can tell you it means a lot. It means a lot when you come home from work or whatever you're doing and somebody has tried and you know the struggle they're dealing with, whether it's children, their own jobs, problems in extended family. When they've went through that effort to give you some peace and some comfort, well, that means a lot. And that means you have more that you can give back to them. Same thing with children. You think you should provide a good environment for your children, be willing to help them and guide them and give them the needs that they have to be ahead in life. And I would tell you, it may look a lot different. I have 2 kids. I know almost no one can afford a home nowadays. Certainly no one's going to be able to afford one when they're grown. I'm already trying to look, what can I do? How can I make moves so that I can find something for them to get started on? If I'm not going to help them, who will, right? And these are very real challenges that we can start tackling within our own home. And let's flip it then. when you're a child and you're now grown and your parents are aging? You have a responsibility to be hospitable to them? A huge resounding yes, I hope. I hope you all feel that way. The people that gave you life and nourished you and took care of you, when the roles are reversed, they gave you everything they had. Everything they had. I think it's within our scope of responsibility and with what Scripture commands to continue to provide a good and comfortable place for them if it's within our means or whatever we can do. Any thoughts or questions, comments before we close out? I don't want to always be the last one to go on a tangent. Anybody have anything they want to draw out? All right. Thank you, guys. Again, I know this is something that you do really well at, so please help in the preparation for the next class. Because you are so good at this, I think you'll have some good input, and I appreciate your attention.